What if the funniest thing you ever saw on television wasn't planned at all? No script, no rehearsal, just one man walking out from behind a curtain and detonating like a firework someone forgot to point away from the building. That's what it was like every single time a certain wild-haired comic showed up on a certain legendary late-night couch. People didn't tune in to see a guest. They tuned in to see if the host could survive the next 20 minutes. Today, we're taking a walk back through some of the most unforgettable moments this comedian ever brought to that stage. Stick around, because by the end you'll understand why grown adults, including the host himself, would just put their heads in their hands laughing, unable to keep up. Robin Williams. Let's start with the moment he becomes a runaway train the second he steps into frame. The host tries to introduce him with a straight face, calling him a serious dramatic actor, and you can almost feel the whole studio brace itself, because everyone in that room knows exactly what's coming isn't serious at all. He doesn't even need to open his mouth yet. His energy alone tells the audience that nobody is steering this ship tonight. Within seconds, he's off on marriage and money, twisting the word alimony into something that sounds like it was invented specifically to hurt men's wallets. He digs up a fake Latin origin for divorce that gets funnier the more confidently he says it, then pivots straight into an old flame turned courtroom disaster. It's less a joke and more a chain reaction, one line lighting the fuse for the next, before the host can even process what just happened. Then, out of nowhere, Shakespeare enters the chat. He grabs an invisible dagger, strikes a pose, and suddenly, he's doing Hamlet like it's an action movie trailer. He riffs on wearing tights on stage, jokes about how nobody can tell what's going on down there, and then flips into a full mini monologue that somehow blends princely tragedy with tearing through drywall and flexing. It sounds absurd written out, but in the moment, it's a masterclass in taking something stiff and academic and making it feel like a barroom brawl. He even name-drops other actors, imagining how they'd play the melancholy Dane, and each impression lands like its own 5-second sketch. From there, the material gets political fast. He talks about a fictional letter supposedly written by a sitting president, and before you know it, he's doing impressions of world leaders trying to rehearse a diplomatic phone call, botching the same line over and over, like nervous kids before a school play. It's rapid fire, cartoonish, and razor-sharp all at once, poking fun at foreign policy by turning it into a badly memorized script, read by men who clearly don't understand each other. He also isn't afraid to get personal about the industry itself. He describes the surreal experience of sitting in an audience on award night, camera pointed right at your face, forced to smile warmly the instant someone else's name is called as the winner. He jokes that the honest reaction would be a lot less graceful than what actually gets broadcast, and there's something oddly touching buried in the punchline, like he's letting you in on a secret that everyone in that industry knows, but nobody says out loud. Robert De Niro. When the host asks about working across from a much more serious, understated co-star, he paints a picture of two completely different energies colliding on set. One man reserved and quiet, the other one bouncing off the walls. He jokes that the moment those two personalities actually meet in the middle of a scene, something in the universe might just short-circuit. It's a quick bit, but it captures something true about contrast, about how comedy and stillness can exist in the same room and somehow make each other work. From there, the tone shifts, almost without warning. He starts describing filming inside an actual psychiatric hospital, working alongside real patients who were living with schizophrenia and other conditions. He recalls a moment where the direction given to background patients accidentally pulled them out of their own private reality, and you can hear him choosing his words carefully here. Still funny, still charming, but clearly also holding a real tenderness for the people he met during that shoot. It's one of those rare moments where the jokes slow down just enough to let some genuine humanity through. Oliver Sacks. He then turns to describing the real neurologist whose writing inspired that very film, painting him as this larger-than-life figure, physically massive, endlessly warm, brilliant beyond words, but also hilariously scattered, the kind of man who might have breakfast still stuck in his beard hours later without noticing. He describes how this doctor studied patients who had been essentially frozen for decades after surviving a rare brain illness from earlier in the century, and how a certain medication used for other conditions ended up waking them from that frozen state after all those years. It's an incredible true story, and he tells it with genuine awe, only cutting the tension at the very last second, with one perfectly timed joke about somebody just trying to shake the patients awake sooner. Johnny Carson. Let's jump to an entirely different appearance, one of his very first times ever sitting on that particular couch. He starts by mocking door-to-door religious salesmen, doing an exaggerated bit about their perfectly styled hair and expensive suits contrasted with the sad, wilting flowers they're handing out, framing the whole thing as a kind of spiritual infomercial. It's silly, but there's a sharp little observation buried in there about how easily belief gets marketed and sold on television. He also opens up, just for a moment, about real nervousness before walking out, joking that his whole body wanted to bolt before the cameras even rolled. Then he pivots into a bit about people assuming performers never get nervous, needing pharmaceutical help to get through a show, being the awkward neighborhood kid on Halloween that everyone recognized before he says another word. There's something sweet hidden in there. A grown man performing confidence while gently admitting he used to feel like the odd one out. When asked where home is, he can't just answer normally. He spirals into an entire riff about a psychiatric hospital, dolphins, medication side effects, way too much coffee, layering image after image, until the question about hometown becomes a 5-minute detour through his own imagination. Eventually he does answer, mentioning a somewhat unconventional high school experience back in San Francisco, and jokes about a history teacher who apparently thought he was reliving the Lincoln assassination in real time, complete with a kid in the back row playing along as the shooter. He admits he was actually the quiet, geeky kid growing up, though the sheer volume of energy required to say that line makes it almost impossible to believe. He grabs a prop pencil, bearing a former president's name, and cracks a quick joke about it having no point, a tiny throwaway line that somehow lands as a bigger political jab than a 5-minute monologue could. Then he moves into questions about his own wedding ring and personal life, twisting sincere answers into jokes about domestic violence fantasies delivered in exaggerated dramatic voices, before circling all the way back to classical training, joking that his old headmaster once told him the theater needed him right as he announced plans to go sell cars instead. He does an entire bit imagining a modern retelling of Hamlet, reworked for network television during ratings season, joking that the famous soliloquy gets replaced by something far dumber and flashier. Then he actually starts performing a piece of the real speech, only to let it collapse into nonsense about designer clothing and confused cameramen, blurring the line between the performance and whatever chaos is happening backstage until there's no difference between the two anymore. Jonathan Winters. Before wrapping this particular visit, he turns unexpectedly gentle when the conversation drifts to a fellow comedian he clearly idolized. He tells a quick story about wandering the studio lot dressed as a Civil War cavalry officer, just for fun, confusing very serious executives who had no idea what was happening. Underneath the impressions and gentle mockery, there's real affection here. One wildly creative performer paying tribute to the man who kind of invented that whole unpredictable style before he ever got the chance to run with it himself. Robin Williams. Now let's fast forward to one of his most electric appearances, one where he essentially turns the entire American news cycle into a comedy fever dream. He walks out carrying fake retirement gifts for the host, joking about getting him settled into old age with rocking chairs and prune juice energy, teasing him with the kind of affectionate cruelty reserved only for someone he clearly respects deeply. Then things get sharper. He tackles real unrest happening in American cities at the time, describing the National Guard being sent in without ammunition, twisting a genuinely tense moment into something absurd, almost frightening in how funny it manages to be, despite the seriousness underneath. He imagines a certain vice president being coached line by line on how to discuss a fictional sitcom character controversy, stumbling over names, getting corrected over and over, painting a picture of a politician who is completely out of his depth, trying to sound relevant. He does the same thing with air travel and assassination attempts, joking about how safe a president's plane really is, compared to the actual danger the president himself represents to his own approval ratings. He imagines a sitting president trying to rebrand failed promises with a catchy new slogan, and pokes at a third-party candidate by comparing his sudden appeal to marketing a certain fast food chicken brand, arguing that people don't actually care about personal scandal, as long as there's an actual plan behind the campaign. He riffs on a sitting president's infamous denial about drug use, calling it a hard claim to sell, then pivots to imagining a rival candidate's polar opposite problem instead. He paints a former president as a walking cowboy fantasy, talking to horses and pretending everything is fine, joking about a newly announced grandchild while somehow making an entire family legacy sound like an ongoing soap opera. And he closes the political stretch by imagining hosting his own strange, extremely mismatched daytime talk show, mixing religious icons with over-the-top celebrity gossip, poking fun at how easily fame, faith, and marketing get blended together on television. He shares a story about teaching his very young son a nursery rhyme, joking that it feels less like a bedtime routine and more like a brutal audition for a future in show business. He describes taking his toddler to a famous theme park, admitting that through a small child's eyes, a beloved cartoon mouse just looks like an oversized rodent, and a certain goofy dog character looks like he just escaped something much darker. It's a sweet, funny bit about how kids see through the magic adults have convinced themselves to believe in. He jokes about life on his ranch, joking that the animals up there practically need their own rehab program, considering how chaotic things get, and pivots into a quick bit about street performers in New York, claiming he even spotted a former disgraced president out there trying his hand at rap music. He tears through a few more presidential impressions, treating each former leader like an old toy being taken apart, piece by piece, to see what actually made them tick. Then comes a genuinely wild extended bit, imagining a tense nuclear negotiation between two world leaders, blending Cold War paranoia with pop culture references, joking about trading missiles for movie merchandise and international real estate deals, turning decades of geopolitical tension into a drunken late-night bargaining session between two guys who clearly don't trust each other, but also can't stop talking. He even makes fun of his own athletic failures, joking that he was such a weak football player in school that coaches actively tried redirecting him toward literally any other sport, painting himself as the slowest, smallest kid on the field, who somehow still ended up center stage anyway. He wraps the whole wild stretch with an extended bit about televangelists, mocking their exaggerated hairstyles, expensive wardrobes, and theatrical healing performances, joking about touching the television screen for blessings, while sneaking in a quick jab about tax exemptions along the way. It's silly on the surface, but there's a sharper point buried underneath about how easily faith gets packaged and sold for a television audience. And that's the thing about watching him work. He wasn't just telling jokes for laughs. Every single appearance felt like watching someone empty an entire brain's worth of ideas onto a stage in real time, bouncing from politics to childhood memories, to classical literature, to his own insecurities, without ever once slowing down enough for anyone to catch their breath. It's part of why, decades later, people still go back and rewatch these old clips, not just to laugh, but to marvel at just how fast one mind could move when it was firing on all cylinders. So here's the real question for you. Out of everything covered here, which bit hit you the hardest? The Shakespeare chaos, the political spirals, the sweet moment about his son, or something else entirely? Drop your favorite down in the comments. Hit that like button if this brought back some good memories, and subscribe if you want more deep dives into the moments that made late-night television legendary.